convergence of two forms of eschatological thought.
I deliberately paused when I suggested that perhaps Turkey would invade Syria, and that would be the beginning of the great wars. I'm not a prophet. No, I make mistakes. I'm just suggesting that perhaps this might happen. So no one should say that I'm prophesying that this will happen. No, that's not part of a scholarly discussion at all. This is an option that they have. This is perhaps the best option that they have. And I see no reason why they should not be pursuing this option of a Turkish invasion of Syria. A Turkish invasion of Syria would not only be for the purpose of trying to bring about regime change in Syria. They also want to deliver a very humiliating blow to Russia. If Russia loses Syria, Syria has a defense treaty with Russia. It's an ally of Russia, not like Libya. And if Russia loses her naval base on the Syrian Mediterranean coast, and it is replaced with a NATO base, the loss of face for Russia would be strategically disastrous. There would be military implications as well, but I'm not a military strategist to be able to dwell on that point. I think the master plan which the Ottoman pursued, and which the Salafis are now pursuing after the Ottomans, is to drive a wedge as deep as they can possibly drive between the world of Islam and Rome. That's why the Ottoman Empire did so many things that it did in enslaving Christian women, and then they became members of the harem. Ottoman sultans never married, because if they married, their wives would have rights and their children would have legal rights, but slaves don't have rights. So they had only slaves, and they were all Christian women. I think one was a Russian, the wife, the concubine of Suleiman. They took Christian boys, which again is shameful for us, and converted them to Christianity, to Islam. This never happened in our history. Never, never, never. The Quran expressly prohibits. There is no compulsion in religion. And then these boys, having been converted to Christianity, were brought up to become the elite janissary fighting force which protected the Sultan himself. And so the Ottoman sultans did not trust their own people. When Hagia Sophia was converted to a masjid, I think that was a dagger that was plunged deepest of all into the heart of Rome, in consequence of which there has been abiding hatred for Islam in many parts of Rome. And we saw some of it in the Bosnian War, in Srebrenica. We see it in Greece, where that pain and that hatred is still there because of what the Ottomans did. But this was not enough. They need something more. So if they bring about regime change in Syria, sadly I have to say, the world will have to expect a slaughter of the Christians of Syria at the hands of the Salafi. And they're not going to be slaughtering the Christians because of any enmity with the Christians of Syria. I think the Christians of Syria will be slaughtered in order to drive the deepest wedge of all between the world of Islam and Rome. And this is why Syria is so important, and we are grateful to Russia that Syria has not become another Libya. We put a question mark behind Russia, another question mark behind China over what happened in Libya. And one day probably Russia will explain to us what happened. Why did Russia and why did China sacrifice Libya the way they did? But Russia has stood up in Syria, and because of that military stance of Russia, so far Syria has not fallen. But if Turkey attacks Syria, then the game changes.